The impact came in the middle of the night, sharp enough to jolt Steven Callahan awake, as if the ocean itself had slammed a fist into the hull. One moment the Napoleon Solo was slicing through a calm Atlantic swell, and the next it was groaning under enormous pressure, tilting hard as water surged in from a breach he couldn't see. He jumped from his bunk and felt the cold rush around his ankles, rising too fast for the boat to be saved. The cabin lights flickered. The noise was deafening. Rushing water, splintering fiberglass, the hissing of air escaping someplace deep in the hull. He knew instantly that the boat would not last more than a few minutes. He scrambled onto the slanted deck, fighting the wind as he ripped open the storage compartment. The emergency raft burst open with a muted thump, inflating just as a wave crashed over the bow. With no time left, he threw himself into the raft, clutching a tiny bag of salvaged supplies. Behind him, the Napoleon Solo tilted, paused as if taking a last breath, and then disappeared under the dark water. Dawn revealed what his panic hadn't allowed him to see. The raft was barely more than a floating rubber ring with a thin floor already sagging in the heat. Salt water sloshed inside. Callahan inventoried what he had recovered. Patch kits, a survival manual, a small spear gun, emergency rations, a knife, and 2 fragile solar stills. There was no emergency beacon, no way to call for help. The nearest shipping lanes were far beyond the horizon. Within days, the raft's weaknesses became clear. The floor panels leaked. The canopy tore in the first sun-baked afternoon. Sharks circled almost immediately, shadows gliding beneath the raft, testing it with slow bumps. Each time their bodies scraped the rubber, the whole raft shuddered. The spear gun was meant for hunting fish, not for defending against predators, and Callahan knew a single puncture in the wrong place would end everything. The first storm arrived on his 4th day. The sky collapsed into sheets of rain and wind powerful enough to lift the raft like a toy. Waves broke over him, filling the raft faster than he could bail. Lightning cracked across the black water, illuminating walls of foam that swallowed the horizon. The raft flipped, dumping him into the ocean. He clawed back onto it, choking on seawater, desperately clinging to the slick rubber until he could right it. His supplies were soaked, half lost, or damaged beyond use. By the time the storm passed, he was shivering uncontrollably, every muscle vibrating from exhaustion. His hands bled from gripping the raft's rope lines, his legs cramped from dehydration. He slept in short bursts, waking each time the raft sagged under his own weight, or a wave slapped the side. Hunger arrived as a constant ache. He tried fishing with his spear and fingers, luring Dorado close with pieces of fabric or scraps from his rations. When he caught one, he devoured it raw, saving every strip he could dry in the sun. Birds landed on the raft occasionally, exhausted from long flights, and he would grab them quickly, wringing their necks, using every bit of meat and fat to stay alive. Fresh water was worse. The solar stills, delicate plastic domes meant to evaporate seawater into drinkable droplets, barely produced enough to fill a cup after days of waiting. They cracked easily. He patched them with tape and glue, protecting them like they were the last valuable things he owned. When clouds blocked the sun, the stills slowed to nothing. His tongue swelled from dehydration. Some days he rationed himself to a few sips, other days none at all. The raft gradually became its own enemy. Constant sun exposure weakened the seams. Each morning, he woke to a new sag in the floor or a section where the rubber buckled inward. The sharks kept coming, drawn by the smell of fish remains or the splashing of storms. He began sleeping with one hand on the spear gun, ready to jab downward at any shadow that pressed too hard against the raft's walls. Sometimes he could hear them at night, sliding under him, the soft scrape of skin against rubber like something breathing. More storms followed. One tore the raft's canopy completely off. Another flipped the raft again, dragging him under long enough that he wasn't sure which way was up. When he surfaced, gasping, the raft was on its side, half submerged, the solar stills barely hanging on. He pulled himself in, coughing, shaking, too weak to do anything but lie there and let tears mix with salt water on his face. His body grew skeletal, his skin cracked from sun exposure, peeling in wide sheets. Saltwater sores opened along his legs and hips. Every patch he applied to the raft was temporary. Sometimes the patches failed overnight, forcing him to wake in the dark with water pooling under him. Despite the pain, he kept a log of each day, forcing himself to write even when his hands shook from weakness. He tracked his drift path as best he could. He talked to himself to stay alert. He recited plans, reminded himself to check the seals, to repair small leaks before they became large ones. He forced himself not to drink seawater, even when desperation made it tempting. On the 47th day, he spotted what might have been a distant ship. He fired a flare, one of the last he had, but the ship never changed course. He watched it disappear into the horizon and sank back into the raft, feeling the kind of despair that burned low and cold. Storms continued to batter him. One particularly violent night left the raft nearly shredded, the floor panels tearing under the force of waves. He spent hours holding the raft together with his own weight, plugging leaks with his hands, whispering to himself that morning would come, that he could not die after coming so far. His body was barely functioning when he saw birds, not ocean birds, but land birds. At first he thought he was hallucinating, but then he saw another, then another. Hours later, through the haze of dehydration, he spotted a faint line on the horizon. The shape sharpened. It was an island. Real land. He sobbed, too weak to sit upright. As he drifted closer, a small fishing boat spotted his raft. The fishermen hauled him aboard, stunned by the skeletal, sunburned man who collapsed at their feet. They gave him water slowly, speaking to him in soft voices. His body shook as he swallowed. They carried him to shore, where he was taken to a small clinic. Steven weighed barely 100 pounds. It would take months for his body to recover. But he had survived 76 days alone in the Atlantic, fighting storms, sharks, hunger, thirst, and a raft that fell apart piece by piece under him. He walked into the ocean to escape death and somehow drifted back into life. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.